I want to welcome you all and express our gratitude for you joining this fellowship program of the Ambassadors for Health Equity. This amazing canvas of leaders that you see before you are the third cohort that Policy Link has run of this program, which is supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And we have used it as a forum for convening local and national leaders who are solving some of the nation's most challenging problems. And this cohort is focused on all leaders from the housing justice world. And the arc of learning this year has included that each of those sectors presented their history, their cultural roots and accomplishments, the challenges that they face, and the potential future contributions that they could make to housing justice.
We worked on our vision of housing with the foundation that housing is a human right. We first acknowledged the trauma that has happened in this country around housing and who provided that trauma. We want to have truth and reparations. We want to make sure the solutions are done through the community. The community has self-determination, and that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And of course, you make sure we do collective liberation and end white supremacy. But when we do that, we move everyone forward in all of our work.
So we just wanted to share this image because the light in the center really represents the light in each of us, that we are the impetus for change, and we carry this energy with us as we move forward in this work.
So our housing system is built to manage and maintain the American caste system. It maintains housing as unstable and conditional. Even with the best of policies, they're always about the quickest, cheapest solution and how to maintain wealth and mortgages. We have the amount of resources we need to have collective liberation, and we just need to get out of the way of the progress that's being made and focus on investing in the self-determination of communities to use those resources under their control to build toward collective liberation.
Fundamentally, most of the affordable housing work in our country is really about preventing death and sustaining the systems of oppression that currently exist by creating affordable housing that only marginally or incrementally improve lives. And we have to do that. I think that's, acknowledged by most in our group, that we have to keep doing that, especially right now, in order to prevent people from literally being on the street. But what we'd like to see is increasing investment of all kinds of resources towards transformative strategies and ultimately towards more radical imagining of our systems towards greater racial justice. So when we think about transforming the systems we have, right, this inches us towards building a longer-term housing and health infrastructure, especially for those who have been most disadvantaged in our country, our Black and Indigenous people of color.
And the starting point has to be healing. It has to be an acknowledgement of the past, the truth-telling. Many of our stories, especially as Indigenous people, have gone untold for far too long. You can't just dump in a bunch of money. You can't dump in cheapest, easiest solutions, which we see a lot from our federal partners. And we don't want to reconcile anything from the past. Those past relationships have been harmful and genocidal. We want reparations. That's the scratching of the surface of beginning this healing journey and collective movement towards liberation. The other component to truth and reparations is the return of the land to Indigenous hands.
President Woodrow Wilson said that self-determination is not just a mere phrase, but a principle of action. And that's what this is about, making sure that we are engaging with the community, getting their input, their thoughts, making sure that their voices are heard as programs are developed, and recognizing the freedom of self-determination is also the freedom to be responsible. Our community's been so conditioned to programs being dictated to us. So sometimes the fear of change or failure comes in, but we believe that self-determination with community stewardship is the pathway to achieving our goals.
We developed a vision for an equity scorecard that could measure housing policies which center an expansive notion of health equity one that's fundamentally connected to our movement and embedded deeply in our value systems. And the scorecard is part of a process for shared learning, defining our values and building collective power and really prioritizing process over outcomes. And as we've learned over the course of our health equity fellowship, health is more than just the absence of disease. It's comprised of community systems that will produce mental, spiritual, physical, cultural, and ecological health. Communities also need to be given the tools, resources, and power to be able to define what health means for their communities.
We see an enhanced equity scorecard as a way of building shared values, shared understanding about the policies in the community context from which individuals, families, and communities experience policy, and to build ultimately collective power. And with that in mind, we envision a scorecard being used primarily by grassroots members, both to respond in a rapid response mode, which unfortunately a lot of our organizations are put in the position of, quickly using a scorecard to evaluate how a policy might benefit certain parts of the community and potentially do harm or create unintended consequences. And then also through this process, really begin to advocate for the resources that are necessary. That includes language access, digital access, so that people can, genuinely participate in this process.
Most of our work happens in the harm reduction space. It's just trying to get right now, today, and the energy that is taking moves us away from the things that we know long term are actually most meaningful in terms of liberation. One of the things that's made this experience really valuable, I think, to everybody that's been involved is the space to think at the top of that spectrum, right? What would it look like to have liberatory systems in place of what we have? How do we create and maintain the space to be able to do that? The work that we know is really the longer term, most impactful for what we know matters.
So in trying to think about all of this, we also wanted to just be very clear about the ways in which we are doing work within an existing system while envisioning a liberatory system that will allow all of us to get closer to our goals. And so we recognize that many of us have been granted access to spaces where we would normally have been excluded, but we definitely want to bring our full selves to the spaces. And that includes reclaiming who we are fully, not just the palatable parts of us, right? That the power structure accepts. That includes recognizing that our struggles are tied up in the struggles of other groups that experience oppression. And we also have a deep understanding that a system based on white supremacy, right, is not going to continue to serve us, is not going to work for us in getting toward liberation.
How do we balance the sense of urgency and visioning what we really want, asking for what we need and not compromising and negotiating?
I think one of the things that is really acknowledged in all of this is that we are doing two jobs. As advocates, as people in this work, we are trying to build something new while also existing in a system that has worked against us, that pits us against each other.
How do we build new systems? How do we transform? How to reform? How do we build it in a way that it sounds like us? We tell the stories that are our stories. How do we have ownership and agency in something that is ours?
The work to achieve real change is a constant struggle, a struggle we have been in and will continue until real change happens. With that said, we want to leave you with the following questions. How are you showing up in this movement? Please do not expect a cutting-edge community-led organization to function like a mainstream organization. What are you doing to change your own culture? And how can you change systems to meet needs where we're at?
What I most appreciate is our commitment towards one another and to the work that we do. That has been outstanding.
Feeling very lucky to work with such wonderful people. It's the best part of doing this work is being able to work with people you respect and can learn from. So that really warmed my heart this last week.